Good afternoon, OPS. I'm glad to see you back today. And I'm wondering if you're doing what I'm doing and looking out the window and wondering, is it going to stop raining? Am I going to get to go outside a little bit today? I think this story has a lot to do with looking out the window because you're going to learn about a little girl whose name is Hannah. And Hannah was watching something happen outside her window for a very long time. You might be learning something about me as a reader. I love books that take place in different times in history because that's how I learn about the past. I'm not somebody that likes to open up a history textbook and read all about different facts. I like stories. So when I read a story that the setting is in a historical time, it helps me start to learn about that time and I get more interested. And then I find that what I start to do is I start to research and learn even more about it. So I'm going to tell you something interesting about this book at the end of it. But right now, this book is called 21 Elephants. "21 Elephants" by Phil Beldner. We have a little bit of glare today. Let's see what we can do about that. Ever since she was a little girl, Hannah watched the workers build the first steel suspension bridge in the whole world, the Brooklyn Bridge. She dreamed of the day when she would finally be able to walk across it and on out into the big city. There we go. So I'll make sure you can see the illustrations afterwards. So you see Hannah there, and she's pretty little there. I'd say she's about 2, maybe 3, and she's watching the bridge be built. And that bridge starts with the 2 towers, that one and that one over there. Oh, I was right. When she was 2, she waved to the enormous towers rising from the waters. When she was 3, she pointed to the traveler rope as it first stretched across. When she was 8, she gazed and gaped as they suspended the floor beams. Hannah's father loved his little girl dearly, but he always clutched her hand a little tighter and drew in his breath a little deeper whenever she peered out at the modern marvel. Now think about what we know about writers. Writers try to create a picture for the reader, so they don't just tell us someone was scared, they give us hints at it. So think for a minute. What was Dad doing? He loved his little girl dearly, but he always clutched her hand a little tighter and drew in his breath like this, a little deeper whenever she peered out at the modern marvel. So it sounds to me like Hannah's dad, is a little scared of the bridge. You know what else I learned on this page? That it took a really long time for the Brooklyn Bridge to be built. So it started when she was 2, and when she was 8, they were laying the floorboards. So let's see, that's at least 6 years, right? Do you imagine taking 6 years to build something? And when that day finally arrived, and at long last, the Brooklyn Bridge was complete. You see it over here? You see the bridge? "No little girl of mine will cross that metal monster," her father declared as he waved and pointed to the nearly 6,000-foot-long structure that now spanned the East River. Then he added, "Anything that stretches that long and rises that tall can't possibly be safe." So for years, Hannah watched that bridge be built. And now her dad's saying, "No daughter of mine is going to cross that bridge. It's unsafe." When Chester A. Arthur, the 21st President of the United States, stood on the bridge alongside the governor of New York and the mayor of New York City and pronounced it the 8th wonder of the world, Hannah thought for sure her father would come to his senses. For sure he would allow her to cross the bridge, but he simply folded his arms, scratched his chin, and shook his head. No, not even the commander-in-chief could change his mind. Look at that illustration there. You know, when you really want to do something and there's an adult that looks like that, do you think they're going to let you do it? Okay, so you got all those very important people on the bridge. They're all saying it's safe, but to Hannah's dad, not so much. When Mrs. Emily Roebling, the bridge's chief engineer, took the first ride across the bridge with a rooster, the symbol of victory, Hannah thought for sure her father would see the light, but he simply folded his arms, scratched his chin, and shook his head. Nope, not even the woman who had supervised the last years of the entire project could change his mind. Yet Hannah refused to give up. There had to be a way to show her father all the marvels of the Brooklyn Bridge. There also had to be a way to convince him that it was strong and it was safe. Do you see the rooster there? So she's got it in her arms, right over here. I didn't know the rooster was a sign for victory, so I learned something else today also. Hannah started with her family. "It's too long," cried her cousins. "It's too tall," said her grandma. "If you ask me," her great aunt added her great aunt, "it's certain to collapse. That bridge looks like nothing more than a bunch of cardboard boxes tied together with string." "With all due respect," Hannah said, because she couldn't be impolite, "the towers are made of granite, and there's over 14,000 miles of wire. Together, it all weighs 14,680 tons. Well, I'd first power the Fulton Stream ferry with my fists and feet before going over that bridge," her uncle announced, and everyone laughed. So Hannah keeps trying, but every time she tries to prove to them how strong the bridge is, they all just laugh. Do you think Hannah's going to give up, or is she going to find a way to convince her family that the bridge is safe? Hannah tried at school next. "It's too long," cried her teacher. "It's too tall," said her classmates. "If you ask me," added the librarian, "it's certain to collapse. That bridge isn't strong enough for all that hustle and bustle back and forth. A small town like Brooklyn has no business connecting itself to a big city like Manhattan." "With all due respect," Hannah said, because she couldn't be impolite, "Brooklyn is hardly a small town. Over 400,000 people live here. Brooklyn is the third largest city in America. And with Brooklyn now connected to Manhattan, New York City could one day become the capital of the world. Well, I'd first swim across the river, and I'd float like a rock before traversing that contraption," her principal announced, and everyone laughed. Well, I have to tell you, if I was Hannah's principal, I think I would be a little more supportive of her ideas. Did you see what this principal said? He said he'd rather swim across the river than actually walk across the bridge. Then Hannah went to the market by the church. "It's too long," cried the women at the fruit stand. "It's too tall," said the policeman on patrol. "If you ask me," added the man selling spices, "it's certain to collapse. It's too wide. One lane is all you need, maybe two at the most." "With all due respect," Hannah said, because she couldn't be impolite, "the Brooklyn Bridge needs all 5 lanes. The 2 outer lanes are for horse-drawn carriages. The 2 middle lanes are for the cable trains, and the 5th lane is for pedestrians like you and me." A pedestrian is someone who walks. "Well, I'd first walk on water before I'd walk on the bridge," announced the minister, And everyone laughed. Remember how I said before that one of the reasons I like books that take place in different times in history is because it teaches me about history? So here's something else I just learned. When they go to the market, does it look like the food store you know? It looks a little more like a farmer's market, right? It's outside, and there are different people selling things at different stands. Now Hannah was sad. Why did everyone agree with her father? Why was she the only one who wasn't afraid to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge? Why didn't anyone share her dream? Hannah's father couldn't stand to see his little girl so down. He knew the one thing that would cheer her up. Uh-oh. So look, there's that window again. Remember I said we'd see a lot of a window in this story. Imagine if right outside your window was something you wanted to do more than anything in the world, and all day long all you could do is look at it. The circus! This year, P.T. Barnum's Greatest Show on Earth had an added attraction, a herd of 21 elephants. And leading the herd of 21 elephants was Jumbo, the world's largest elephant. Well, the moment Jumbo and his herd of elephants walked into the big top, the idea popped into Hannah's head. Now, Hannah knew Mr. Barnum was a very busy man, probably much too busy to help out a little girl with a big problem. But Hannah knew he was her only chance. Are you starting to get an idea? So Hannah's going to the circus. She sees the elephants. She says to herself, I might have an idea. She waited until the last juggler stopped juggling and the last clown stopped clowning. Mr. Barnum, she called. Mr. Barnum! Mr. Barnum walked to the edge of the ring. What can I do for you, little lady? Pardon me, Mr. Barnum. Can I please borrow your 21 elephants? Why ever would you want to borrow my 21 elephants, little lady? Well, Mr. Barnum, Hannah replied, if you must know, and I suppose you must, since they are your elephants. Hannah took a deep breath, clutched her father's hand as tight as she could, and explained her idea. When she finished, Mr. Barnum folded his arms, scratched his chin, and nodded his head. Now, wait a minute. Her dad did that before, but somehow it feels a little different now. Look at his face. He's smiling. When her dad did it, he wasn't smiling as much. Great minds think alike, little lady. Mr. Barnum reached into his pocket and handed her a flyer. There's no need for you to borrow Jumbo or any of my 21 elephants. This is hot off the press. Start spreading the news. What do you think the news might be? A few mornings later, Hannah was up bright and early. She made sure everyone else was too. Come see, come see. She ran through her house. Come quick, come quick. She ran to the schoolhouse and the marketplace too. Everyone, look. And there, for all of Brooklyn to see, was a sight almost too amazing to believe. So she's getting everyone ready. Let's look at what that sight is. Do you see it? It's all 21 elephants marching across the Brooklyn Bridge. Do you think that will convince the people that the bridge was strong enough for a person if 21 elephants could walk across it? Yes, Hannah had finally found the way to prove to her father and everyone in Brooklyn, for that matter, that the bridge was indeed safe and strong. And from that day forth, Hannah and her father walked across the Brooklyn Bridge as often as they could. Now, I told you I love books that have an author's note, so let me read to you what the author tells us about this story. Yes, P.T. Barnum did indeed march Jumbo in a parade of circus elephants across the Brooklyn Bridge on the evening of May 17, 1884. By then, the bridge had been open for almost a year, and many people went across it often. In fact, thousands of pedestrians and hundreds of vehicles crossed the bridge on the very first day, and within months of its opening, the first passenger train was already making trips. However, a lot of Brooklynites, that's what we call the people that lived in Brooklyn or live in Brooklyn now, still refused to go across the bridge. And undoubtedly, the events of the previous Memorial Day had much to do with that. You see, just days after the bridge opened, a woman tripped while climbing the steps. She tripped just like you and I could trip. And a nearby pedestrian screamed, and instantly a rumor started that the bridge was on the verge of collapse. And that made a lot of people run, and a lot of people got hurt. And even though politicians and engineers and even Emily Roebling tried to reassure the people that the bridge was safe, that was just a woman who tripped and people reacted, they still would not go across the bridge. As the weeks and the months passed, the people did get more and more accepting of the bridge. But it was the greatest showman to ever walk the planet who finally laid to rest all the doubts and concerns. So what convinced P.T. Barnum to do it? Surely somewhere in Brooklyn, maybe there was a little girl who saw the bridge as her opportunity. And who knows, maybe that little girl's name was Hannah. See, that's why this book is just like when we read a book earlier in the week and we said it's based on some true events, but not everything is true. So that's why we find that book in the fiction section of the library instead of the nonfiction section of the library. Because we don't know if there was a Hannah and if that Hannah wrote to Mr. Barnum or if she went to see Mr. Barnum. But we do know for fact that Mr. Barnum did lead 21 elephants across the Brooklyn Bridge. And that story became so popular that this is not the only book about the 21 elephants. So if you ask someone later, an adult at home, because you should never be going on YouTube without asking an adult at home, what you can find is another book called 21 Elephants and Still Standing. It's another picture book by a different author about the same exact event. And that happens a lot in history. We have a lot of books about the same thing that happens, and authors think it's really interesting and they write a story about it. So I'm a little stuck on picking a book for tomorrow. So it's going to be a surprise because I have to decide if I want to share about Amelia Earhart and Eleanor Roosevelt going for a ride, which is a pretty interesting book in history, or am I going to share about the Dayglow brothers, about two brothers who completely by accident invented Dayglow paint because that didn't always exist. So I haven't decided yet. So I'm going to read them both tonight, and tomorrow I'll let you know which one we're going to read. So have a great day. Let's keep looking out the window and hope that maybe it will actually stop raining.